From the watchtower of observation, the WinOwl owl contemplates the complex threads that weave human relationships. Each story, each confession, is a map that allows us to navigate through the territories of the heart and mind. Analyzing these real narratives is not an exercise in judgment, but in understanding. It teaches us about the fragility of trust, the architecture of communication, and the unforeseen consequences of decisions taken in moments of fear. The story we will explore today is a powerful reminder that sometimes the desire to protect a fortress is corrupted by the pride of knowing that others still wish to besiege it. Welcome everyone to this space of reflection by WinOwl. Here, we gather not only to listen but to learn. Our purpose is to dive into real stories that, in their particularity, offer us profound and universal lessons about the human condition. The story we will now share came to us as an anonymous letter in our digital mailbox, under the title The Autopsy of My Love. To protect the total privacy of its author, we have modified identifying details. Her courage in sharing such an intimate and painful experience is immense, and it is our duty to honor her vulnerability by treating it with the utmost respect and analytical care. Today, under the thematic title The Chain of Lies That Destroyed Trust, we will analyze how a small omission, born from the desire to protect, becomes the weapon that destroys a solid relationship. To honor the authenticity and raw power of this letter, I will proceed to read it textually, allowing the protagonist herself to tell her story in her own words. Prepare to listen. From the clatter of her keyboard, ghosts resonate like echoes many of us might recognize. 2 years. 730 days of a calm I had come to consider my natural state. Our relationship was a refuge, a space built on foundations of trust and communication that I believed unbreakable. We talked about everything: childhood fears, professional ambitions, the way he liked his coffee and I my tea in the morning. There were no secrets, or so he believed, and I, to some extent as well. That stability, that almost perfect peace, was precisely the treasure I felt compelled to protect at all costs, and it was that desire to protect which led me to plant the seed of our destruction. I remember perfectly the vibration of the phone on the coffee table, an unknown number. I ignored it, but it rang again, and then a message arrived. When I saw his name on the screen, a wave of cold and heat rushed through me in rapid succession. It was him, my ex, a relic of a past I had carefully archived away. I felt a stab of irritation, of invasion. How dare he disturb my present? But if I am completely honest, beneath the irritation vibrated an almost imperceptible note of vanity. The ego is a treacherous beast, and mine felt flattered for an instant, a toxic reminder that I still occupied a place in someone else's mind. My boyfriend, my anchor, the man I loved with a serenity I had never known before, looked up from the book he was reading. "Who is it?" he asked with the same naturalness as when he asked if I wanted more water, and in that instant I made the first fatal decision. My mind raced 1,000 miles an hour, weighing scenarios. If I told him the truth, he would worry. He would get angry, not with me, but with him. It would generate unnecessary tension, a drama imported from a past that no longer belonged to us. I can handle this myself, I told myself. He's my ghost. I don't need to drag him into this hunt. It seemed a noble justification, or so I thought. I wanted to protect our peace. "It's no one important," I replied, forcing a casual smile. That was the first lie, a lie of omission, the most insidious of all. It wasn't an elaborate invention, but a simple door I decided to keep closed. My inner panic, brief but intense, whispered that the truth would only complicate things. I feared his reaction, not because he was jealous or possessive, he never was, but because I feared his concern would taint our tranquility. I believed, with an arrogance fueled by that secret sting of vanity, that I was in control, that I could silence that voice from the past quickly, without him ever needing to know. That small omission was not a mere detour, it was the switch that changed the track of our future. In my eagerness to build a wall around our happiness to protect it from an external threat, I failed to see that I was placing the first brick of the wall that would inevitably divide us. My boyfriend's casual question did not disappear into the air as I had hoped. It lingered between us, invisible but dense. The trust that had been the very air we breathed at home grew rarefied, heavy, like the air before a storm that only I knew was coming. I felt his gaze on me, not accusatory but inquisitive. I noticed his silence whenever I was on the phone, the way his eyes paused a second too long on the screen of my mobile, and that mistrust, instead of pushing me to confess, made me feel cornered. Each unasked question was a new lock on the door I had already closed myself. The pressure drove me to my second grave mistake. I looked at the call history, the insistent messages from my ex. They were the tangible proof of my secret. It was an act of pure narrative cowardice. Instead of confronting the antagonist, I tried to erase him from the manuscript, hoping the reader and the protagonist of my life would not notice the torn-out page. I not only blocked his number, I deleted every trace of his digital existence from my life. A couple of days later, with a calm that froze my blood, he asked me for the phone. My heart stopped. When he confronted me with the empty history, the truth felt like a rope tightening around my neck. I erased everything because I didn't want to hear from him anymore. I explained. I blocked him and deleted his messages to close the matter. The words sounded logical, even to me. They were a half-truth, but I could see in his face that my explanation, though plausible, didn't quite fit. Trust, once fractured, is not repaired with logic. It's understandable, he said, but his eyes said something else. I feel like you're hiding something from me. I pushed him away. I stopped it. I repeated to myself again and again, like a mantra. But it was already too late. The act was done. A whirlwind of guilt, panic, and deep nauseating self-reproach consumed me. In that kiss there was no passion, no desire, only the confirmation of my failure. It was the ultimate betrayal, not only of my boyfriend, but of myself. I returned home feeling like an imposter. The confrontation with my boyfriend was inevitable. His face was a mask of worry and suspicion. And then I told him my edited version of events. I said I had gone to my ex's house to set things straight, to demand that he leave me alone. I omitted the crucial part. I omitted the kiss. At that moment, confessing the kiss felt like pressing the self-destruct button. It was a last, pathetic attempt to contain the damage, to salvage something from the wreckage of my own making. But he looked at me, and in his eyes I did not see relief, but a profound pain. The pain of someone listening to a story they desperately want to believe but cannot. My partial truth sounded as hollow as the complete lie. And when he finally spoke the words, his voice was strangely calm. "I don't believe you," he said. "It's over." My world collapsed. I begged, pleaded, swore that I had only gone to protect him, to protect us. But my words were useless. Trust is not an object that can be glued back together with apologies. It is a living fabric, and I had torn it mercilessly. Shock and denial flooded me as I watched him walk away. It was all over, and all because of a secret I had chosen to cultivate myself. The days that followed the breakup were a hell of my own making. The silence in the apartment was a constant scream echoing my mistakes. I didn't eat. I pushed him away. I stopped it. I repeated to myself again and again, like a mantra. But it was already too late. The act was done. A whirlwind of guilt, panic, and deep nauseating self-reproach consumed me. In that kiss there was no passion, no desire, only the confirmation of my failure. It was the ultimate betrayal, not only of my boyfriend, but of myself. I returned home feeling like an imposter. The confrontation with my boyfriend was inevitable. His face was a mask of worry and suspicion. And then I told him my edited version of events. I said I had gone to my ex's house to set things straight, to demand that he leave me alone. I omitted the crucial part. I omitted the kiss. At that moment, confessing the kiss felt like pressing the self-destruct button. It was a last, pathetic attempt to contain the damage, to salvage something from the wreckage of my own making. But he looked at me, and in his eyes I did not see relief, but a profound pain. The pain of someone listening to a story they desperately want to believe but cannot. My partial truth sounded as hollow as the complete lie. And when he finally spoke the words, his voice was strangely calm. "I don't believe you," he said. "It's over." My world collapsed. I begged, pleaded, swore that I had only gone to protect him, to protect us. But my words were useless. Trust is not an object that can be glued back together with apologies. It is a living fabric, and I had torn it mercilessly. Shock and denial flooded me as I watched him walk away. It was all over, and all because of a secret I had chosen to cultivate myself. The days that followed the breakup were a hell of my own making. The silence in the apartment was a constant scream echoing my mistakes. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I clung to an irrational hope. One last chance. I was convinced that if I could find the right words, the perfect order of syllables and remorse, I could somehow undo the damage. I wrote to him. I called him. I asked, I begged, for one final conversation to explain myself. At last he agreed. When his name appeared on my phone screen, my heart pounded against my ribs. I began to speak, stumbling, trying to articulate my regret, to explain my fear, my foolish attempt to control everything. He listened in silence, and when I finished, his voice came, calm and sharp as a shard of ice. "I spoke to your ex," he said. Those 4 words stopped time. The air froze in my lungs. Terror, pure, icy terror, paralyzed me. In my mind, the phrase did not mean I heard his version, but I know everything. My web of lies, woven with such care and panic, disintegrated in an instant. There was no escape. It was a breaking point, the total collapse of my facade. I surrendered. We kissed, I confessed, and the words poured out like poison, finally finding a way out. It was only a kiss, nothing else happened. I stopped him. It was my last and most pathetic defense, an attempt to minimize the cataclysm, to cling to the distinction between a kiss and something more. But for him, that distinction no longer mattered. I could feel his reaction through the phone. Not anger, not surprise. It was the terrible calm of a man confirming his worst suspicion, the moment when doubt solidifies into bitter certainty. He realized, and so did I, that the truth was no longer the problem. The problem was that he could never again trust a single word that came out of my mouth. "All right," was all he said. And then, silence. A silence that contained the end of everything. He ended the call. Alone, in the stillness of my apartment, I finally faced the complete truth, not the one I told him, but the one I owed myself. The chain of my decisions unfolded before me with brutal clarity. A small omission born of fear and vanity. A lie to cover it. A desperate act to control the situation. A physical betrayal. And finally, a forced confession. I do not seek sympathy, for I do not deserve it. This is simply a testimony, the autopsy of a love I myself murdered. I destroyed the only relationship in which I ever truly felt safe, the only one in which I felt at home. And I did it all in a failed, cowardly attempt to protect it, all because I lacked the courage to tell the truth from the beginning. Without a doubt, the emotional density of this story is palpable. Listening to it is to feel the weight of each decision and the inevitable cascade of its consequences. Now, with the perspective that the complete account gives us, it is our time to unravel its components, to analyze the forks in the road where crucial decisions were made, and to extract lessons that might illuminate our own lives. I now turn to you, the WinOwl community. This story confronts us with difficult questions, and your perspectives greatly enrich the dialogue. I invite you to reflect and share. What do you think was our friend's first fatal mistake, beyond the initial lie? How would you have handled the situation upon receiving the first message from the ex? Is it possible to rebuild trust after such a chain of deceptions? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us place the story under the owl's gaze and pause at its points of no return. What we recount is the autopsy of a love that bled out through small, cowardly, and misnamed acts of protection. The destruction of the relationship was triggered when our friend decided to plant the seed of ruin by lying through omission. When her boyfriend asked who was calling, the first fatal decision was to answer. It's no one important. A simple door she chose to keep closed to preserve their peace and avoid unnecessary tension. That small omission, fueled by a secret sting of vanity and fear of his reaction, was the switch that changed the track of their future. The secrecy and growing mistrust led her to her second grave mistake, an act of pure narrative cowardice that consisted of erasing every digital trace of her ex, blocking his number and deleting the messages in an attempt to rip him out of the manuscript. Though her explanation sounded logical, it did not repair the fractured trust. Her actions only confirmed the suspicion that something was being hidden. Guilty. The pressure escalated when her ex, persistent as ever, contacted her again, asking her to come to his house for an intimate encounter. To avoid involving her boyfriend in admitting the chain of lies, she made the desperate decision to confront him in person, believing this to be the final battle to save her relationship. Yet secretly going to her ex's house, knowing his intentions, was a terrible contradiction and led her to cross a line of no return. This was the first of the desperate actions to control the situation. The climax occurred in a moment of exhaustion and weakness. During the visit to her ex's house, in an instant of passivity, he kissed her. Though she stopped him, the act was already done. It constituted the ultimate betrayal, marked by a whirlwind of guilt and horror. Returning home, our follower tried to contain the damage with a fourth step in the chain of lies, a partial truth, or an edited confession. She told her boyfriend she had gone to her ex's house to set things straight and demand he leave her alone, but crucially omitted the kiss. That partial truth sounded hollow to her boyfriend, who ultimately declared he didn't believe her and ended the relationship. The chain of decisions was only completed with a forced confession. After the breakup, the boyfriend agreed to one final conversation and revealed that he had spoken with the ex. This was the breaking point, as she froze in terror, knowing her web of lies had unraveled. It was then that she confessed the kiss, attempting to minimize the cataclysm by clarifying that it was only a kiss and that she had stopped him. Yet the problem was no longer the truth, but the fact that her boyfriend could never again trust a single word that left her mouth, confirming the bitter certainty of his suspicion. Thus, love was murdered by this chain of decisions, a small omission born of fear and vanity, a lie to cover it, a desperate act to control the situation, a physical betrayal, and finally, a forced confession. The moral of this story is a lesson about the dangerous alliance between fear and ego. Her fear of her partner's reaction was the catalyst, but vanity was the fuel that stoked the flames. She herself admits it. Upon receiving the message from her ex, she felt an almost imperceptible note of vanity. That whisper of ego, flattered at still being desired, was the true crack in the foundation of her relationship. The first lie was born not only from the desire to protect her boyfriend's peace, but also from the arrogance of believing she could handle it on her own. This secret was not only a burden, but also a source of power, a toxic reminder of her influence. She thought she was building a shield to protect her love, failing to realize that the material she was using was nothing but the fragile glass of her own ego, destined to shatter at the first impact. Every subsequent decision, erasing the history, going to her ex's house, was a desperate attempt not only to protect the relationship, but also to protect the secret that fed that vanity. Her own final words summarize everything: the autopsy of a love I myself murdered. This phrase underscores that the weapon of the crime was not the interference of a third party, but her inability to face an uncomfortable truth, poisoned by pride. The enduring lesson is that trust is not the absence of problems, it is the unshakable certainty that, when they arrive, they will be faced together with honesty as the only weapon, and ego banished from the battlefield. If this story has made you reflect, I invite you to give it a like so this analysis can reach more people. Subscribe to WinOwl so you don't miss future case studies that help us better understand the labyrinth of human relationships. And most importantly, share your own perspective in the comments section. Your voice is a fundamental piece of this dialogue. What lesson do you take from this story? We're listening.